Very much, Dr. Swift. Mr. Merisotis, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the chance to be here today. I'm Jamie Merisotis, president of Lumina Foundation. You know, the issues being discussed here today are vital not just to the millions of individuals who are directly affected, but to the growing demand for talent that will impact our entire nation and its future. At Lumina Foundation, which is the nation's largest private foundation focused specifically on increasing students' access to and success in post-secondary education, we're working to improve the nation's talent profile by focusing all of our efforts on one specific goal, what we call Goal 2025. That goal is this: by the year 2025, we want 60% of Americans to hold a high-quality post-secondary degree, certificate, or other post-secondary credential. We're convinced that this level of educational attainment is a national necessity, that it's the only way to ensure our country can thrive in the global economy. Unfortunately, today only about 45% of Americans now hold any kind of post-secondary credential at all. So clearly we're a long way from having the workforce that we need for the 21st century. Certainly service members and military veterans can help close this gap. In fact, they represent a huge asset, a rich source of talent that this nation sorely needs. Unfortunately, as you've already heard, their vast potential is not being fully realized, in part because of barriers imposed by issues related to education credentialing. Lumina is involved in many different areas of work related to credentialing. When we embrace this idea of Goal 2025, we realize very quickly that things must change significantly when it comes to credentialing if we have any hope of reaching that 60% rate. Simply put, our nation's post-secondary system needs to be revamped so that it can serve students better and serve far more of them than it ever has before, including the millions of our military veterans. In short, we need a student-centered system, one that recognizes and rewards not just time spent in a classroom, but actual learning, no matter where or how that learning was obtained. This is critical for service members and veterans. If there's one barrier to post-secondary success facing our returning veterans, that's it: being recognized for what they've learned while in service. Any workable redesign of higher education must address this barrier, which results from the complexity and confusion of our current approach to credentialing. Today's credentialing marketplace is highly fragmented, with a vast array of credentials that don't always connect to each other, to other educational opportunities, or to careers. We need a credentialing system that does connect, one that actually functions as a system, not as a collection of disparate parts. A great deal of our recent work has been focused on reimagining this type of interconnected system. In fact, as Dr. Swift mentioned, we're part of a partnership of more than 80 national organizations, business, education, workforce, labor, and other organizations that have begun a national dialogue on this topic. A reimagined credentialing system would be competency-based, interconnected, and continually updated. It would assure quality, and it would enable users, students, education providers, and employers to compare the value of various credentials. Clearly, a system with these attributes would be of enormous benefit to veterans as they make their transition to civilian life. Of course, the effort to create this type of interconnected system is one that will require concerted action by a range of stakeholders, including the federal government, which has supported credentialing reform through its leadership, through funding, and through participation in research. The Departments of Labor and Education, among others, are already testing approaches to a more inclusive system of credentialing for all students. The federal government should work to link those efforts to the many others underway to build a credential system that works for all learners. Frankly, there are few issues far more urgent than meeting our nation's growing need for talent, assuring that the talent of our veterans is recognized, that they obtain appropriate credentials for what they know and what they can do, and that they have opportunities to develop their talent has great import for the veterans themselves, for their families, their communities, and for our nation. I'm very pleased that this committee and others are considering approaches to breaking down barriers and finding ways to recognize learning and skills however and wherever they're achieved. I'm happy to answer your questions about the steps that the federal government might take in this effort or to provide further information on the work that we're doing in this area. Thank you very much for the chance to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Merisotis.
Do you, any of you might want to answer this, do you see a potential in the area of licensing and credentialing for the kind of predatory marketing that has often gone in the for-profit sector, in higher education, If so, what can we as federal policymakers do now to protect veterans and the integrity of federal programs designed to help them transition into meaningful civilian employment?
It's an enormously difficult question. As you know, as a member of the Education and Workforce Committee, these issues are cutting across federal programs in so many different ways. And I think ultimately this issue of protecting the interests of students, the learners themselves, comes down to the fact that we've got to change the paradigm of what we're actually getting at in these programs. We talk about it whether it's in the GI Bill benefits programs, whether it's in education programs or others. These are all time-based programs, right? So you accumulate college credits, your benefits expire after 36 months. All of these are rooted in these concepts of time instead of concepts of learning. And we should be increasingly pushing these concepts that all of us, I think, have talked about today, which is competency in these programs, and then driving the consumer protection elements around whether or not students, whether they're veterans or other students, have actually learned in these programs. What have they gotten academically? What do they know? What are they able to do out of these programs? Then we would worry less, frankly, about whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit. We'd focus more on what are the learning outcomes. Frankly, we've got some abuses in non-for-profit educational providers as well that we've got to address. So I think these issues that you're talking about, which I think are real and serious, ultimately we've got to get at that root cause of the fact that competency should be what we should be focusing on in all of our post-secondary learning programs.